I'm Seamless, and today I'm here to talk to you about how I made Hyper. So this is the making of a track that I put out recently. I haven't had one of these in forever. Um, if you haven't heard this, the original will be linked in the description, so you can go get it and listen to it. That's cool. There'll be a link to the playthrough video. In the description of the playthrough video, you'll find a free download if you want to go get it. MP3, good stuff. Anyway, this track was made to be in the trailer for the dogfight gameplay video for Soul Contingency, which is a remake of Descent and the Unreal Development Kit. Unreal 3. It's for a good time. That link will also be in the description. Anyway, let's get into the intro with the whole thing on. Stop right there. So, first thing I want to draw attention to is these guys down here. The LEV sounds. LEV is an indicator that these sounds were from the sample pack Leviathan by Black Octopus, which came out recently and has a lot of sounds. It's very cool, very large, and very good. And not only did I make some sounds in it, but the other people who did made some really good ones. Like these impacts. Good stuff. And also, if you're wondering how to get the spectrum view, if you double click on the sample and you get to this window here, if you right click this, you get some view options. Like this is the regular, it's the spectrum, and this is multi-channel, like stereo view. It's nice, it's cool. I tend to stick just to spectrum. I mean, I don't tend to. I honestly didn't know that you could do this until very recently. I thought it was cool, so I decided to screw around with it. But yes, so we have these guitar samples. You actually see that I have my guitar on here, so I can actually show you how I recorded it. I use this guitar. This is a Schecter Damien 6. It's got EMG pickups. It is the EMG HZ, kind of like the shittier EMGs, but this is a pretty cheap guitar. Bling, bling. And I got it like in 2008. It's my first guitar. It's very cool. I enjoy it. Let me kind of show you how the riff works. Pretty much everything in this track is based around this riff. So. You might have noticed I just screwed that up royally, and if you look back at the project in a second, the key here is that I'm actually holding this note, which is the octave. I'm in E right now. I'm actually not in regular E tuning because my guitar in regular tuning that I keep is in DAD fad, so it'd be D A D F A D. But I wanted to do E, and like I actually like lower tunings in the guitar, like way lower than this. But in bass music and EDM and like really solidly low end present music, E is already pretty low, and like A sharp is too low. So tune up to E. So I got on both pickups, the bridge and the neck, and this sort of I'm ensuring that I'm not interfering with the lower string while I'm playing the higher string. Or trying to anyway. And like I said, I kind of screwed up a bit. So in the real for actual track, I cut it up a bunch to ensure that it's more or less acceptable. To edit it, because as well for electronic music, the standards of perfection are quite high. As for the guitar single chain, I have an Edison here, which is how I record everything. And this is actually before anything in the effects chain, which means that when I record it, it records the dry signal. And in fact, without effects, this is what the guitar sounds like. Well, a bit of processing on it because the master has, there you go. So in here, I have a guitar rig, and I'm using the 800 clean preset. This is seriously just a preset. I don't think I'm on this with that at all. I had to tune her on so I could tune a guitar. I had a wave shaper on that's not doing anything. Yeah, so I experimented with having a wave shaper, and I guess I decided I didn't like it. so I don't have to wait shipper on. No difference in the sound. I have this delay on as well, which right when we're listening to it in the very beginning, it's not actually on. It's being automated on over time, and then the effect will become more clear later. And then the EQ just to shape it. So like part of this intro, like when we hear it and get nearer to the end, it actually kind of sounds like the riff changes. Like it's more obvious to us now that we're listening to it by itself that it's just a delay, but when everything's together, it actually sounds like I'm strumming more. And that's neat. So we do have other things that are going on, including the drums. The drums we'll talk about when we get to the actual drop, because that's where most of the important stuff happens. But we also have this other sound here. So what's going on here, primarily, is that this is sort of like an acidy kind of bass thing. This actually used to be just the entire track. Started out with just this. And this is just a harmonic. I have a bit of unison on, but as you see, I'm automating the unison off. That's what this is, unison pitch thickness, this guy here. So the note starts out with a little bit of unison on, and then it clamps right off. I utilize this technique a lot in lots of sounds I make. I also have Vaser on set the box, which is... would look like that if I had it on full, but I don't have it on full. It's the story with the classic sound type. Actually, no, classic or not. I have I'm low passing it with a really big resonance curve on. Like it's just regular low pass and resonance, which is loud resonance, because that's how you do this kind of sound. I also have keyboard tracking on a little bit, which means that when a higher note plays, the filter actually kind of compensates a little bit for it. And you can tell by how whenever a higher note plays, you see that a little bit more of the higher frequencies are actually engaged than if I were just a lower note. So it's because there's keyboard tracking. That's what that does. Now I put delay on it just to have delay on it, and then this business here is just to set up. If I were to play everything, this is just to make it so that it sort of sounds radio-y and weird. I believe I turn it off. Yeah, I turn it off when the main track hits. And then I just have a high pass. The reason I have a high pass is because I have a similar sound playing. That's the bass. So like together. They have a thing together, but in the beginning it's just kind of there for texture, because it's not playing the exact same line as the guitar, but it is following it and it's complementing it. In the drop, it is playing the exact same line. So in the drop, there is another guitar track. This is fun. Recording this worked pretty much the same as the other guitar track. I'll put in the right. Here we go. Now, because this is a distorted guitar sound, I didn't want to hold the octave and a lower note. So instead of using the 7 and the 1, I used that 7 and that 1. Now, I elected not to do the regular progression. And this is primarily because I was trying really hard to avoid remaking The Tempest by Pendulum. That's primarily what's happening. And then I have I recorded it twice using the Edison technique, and then I put them together, the two takes, and then I pan one left and one right. The guitar preset I'm using is a modified 80s solo preset. The modifications pretty much are I turned off the delay and I messed around with the control room to make it sound the way I wanted it to. I messed around with the tone of the screamer a bit. I also pre-EQ'd the dry signal going into the guitar rig, and then I post-EQ'd it. I wave shaped it to get the fuzz in there. That's what we're hearing. And then I post-EQ'd it because I added a lot of stuff. That's pretty much what that is. And then the chords. Oh yes, and that sound. There it is. Basically just find a harmonic that sounds cool and record it twice. That's what I did there. But the chords are fun. Now, I mentioned earlier about being in a different tuning. I am in basically, if I were in drop D, I'd be in open D tuning, open minor as it happens. And as a result, this means that I get interesting chord configurations. So, like this chord, I'm pretty sure those are the chords that I was doing. But I added a note on top of each of those chords right here. It was somewhat difficult to play these chords. I don't actually play in standard very often, so the chord configuration is a bit different. Like if I were to play that in the drop. The extra note that we're adding in is a major third. It's a bit hard to play that drop, which is primarily why I had it open. Whenever, like, if I'm going to do this kind of stuff, I want to have the open note be the tonic. So, like the other recording, I recorded it twice. And the only other different recording happens later. Basically a different arrangement of those same chords, but also there's a lead line sort of. Now the reason why I had that turned down pretty low is because I wanted that in there, but I also didn't want it to be as apparent, that progression to be as apparent in the first half of the section, because I also brought in these chords later on, and they also play the same progression. So that's why I did that. Now, yeah. So back in progression world, where we're doing everything, together. Let's get rid of the guitar because I'm pretty much done with it. I record the guitar DI into my PreSonus Fire Studio project You could do this with lots of things. You don't necessarily need to have something like that to do it. Basically, any audio interface that has a 1/4 inch input will let you do that. No problemo. Certain preamps will be better than others, obviously, but for the most part, they're usually fine. Especially for like not super like touchy recording, because like I did distorted guitar, which you can have even the shittiest preamps will do a good job on, and then I did the clean guitar, but even the clean guitar had a little bit of tinge to it, so like it did not suffer. It would not have suffered if it had a lower quality preamp, but I used mine, which are pretty okay. For this business, this is just some noise that I am volume modulating, and also low pass filtering up. And as you can see, this actually originally went all the way in there, but I wanted to accentuate the these guys by themselves. I had panning and stuff going on and whatever. So I let it do that business. Now, here's also a fun thing. In the intro, I have a different Maximus on the master than I do during the drop, and I changed it here. And in fact, the act of it changing kind of creates an interesting sort of phasing effect, which I'm actually very surprised didn't cause clipping when I recorded this. But the Maximus that I'm using on the rest of the track, that's not just on the intro, is significantly louder than the intro, which is on for a reason. Because if I did that in the intro, it would be the distortion that would happen would not be a good kind of distortion. And I do this for a lot of my tracks. I have on the intro and break, I'll have a different Maximus than I do on the drops, because the drops are usually full of entirely distorted content, which means that when I push it in the red a little bit, it doesn't damage it too much, in my opinion. So that's why when after this happens and the drop hits, there's such a huge difference in volume. It's similar to the technique where when you're approaching a drop, you high pass everything right before it, so that when it hits, the bass is more like forceful. At least how it feels that way. Kind of like that. I didn't really need to do that because there was no bass in anything that I was doing right there. As you see, I also cut off the sample, the impact sample. I did let it continue as it went in here. I didn't let the high one, but the low one I continued. The high one because now there's drums and there's real cymbals and kick drums and all that stuff, so it wasn't necessary. Let's talk about the drums. I want to point out that we were hearing the distort just now. And that's because it's the only thing that's going into the Maximus, which means that only its peaks are being crammed up into that. And like when everything else is together, the distortion is either less apparent or it's less forceful because everything else is adding on top of that, and it's not really being pushed as hard. So hearing it by itself is going to be a bit difficult. And this is also why whenever I talk about how I do mixing, where what I will end up doing is I'll make the loudest section of the track first, and then I'll make the mixing and mastering chain as soon as possible. Even if it's like not the final one, I still do it, because when I make stuff like the drums, and then I mess around with the mix, I need to hear how they all interact together. I can't just make the drums by themselves, make everything else by itself, cram it all together, and then do a whole bunch of changes, because it just won't work that way. So just do it all at once. It's more effective for me that way. So this is a combination of synthetic drums and Superior Drummer. Now in Superior Drummer, I actually have two kick drums that are happening at the same time. If you go into mapping, you can actually basically just drag, like I went to this guy to the left, I drag it over onto C1, which is where the main drum happens at the same that one time. And I said, okay, I want that to be together, and it gives you the option to merge them basically, and I did. Because I wanted the boomy one, but I also wanted the sharpness of the other one. Big snare, no crashes, and a ride. Like, this is all just a taste. The actual instrument choices are not super important, but it is how we mix them is. The synthetic drums. This guy doesn't really make a big difference, but this guy I use for as like the fill snare. Like that. That's like the 90s sort of like Prodigy feeling, like 2000s, I guess, sort of like breakbeat kind of thing. Because this track being made for a trailer. My studies for how I made this track were basically the Prodigy, Overseer, Crystal Method, that kind of thing, like those guys. About how that works. If you go listen to that kind of snare, that sort of Philly snare, is sort of present a lot. Obviously, I took it a little bit farther than in mixing wise than they would have, but that's just my business. So, like I do most other things, I am sidechaining stuff to kick and snare, but I'm sidechaining it to the Superior Drummer kick and snare, which actually, if you look in the sidechain, you can see it behaves very differently. It behaves very differently than like a regular synthetic kick or snare would. As you see, it's a lot sharper. And the reason I'm doing that is because I didn't want it to be super duper sidechain, but I still want to have the whole present for the transients to fill, so that mixing is a bit easier. Yeah. So the the Superior Drummer samples are all going into one mixing bus where I actually have a flanges on before the Maximus, just to give it a kind of weird sort of texture. And then I'm compressing in such a way that it sounds big and open. And this actually, the way you end up doing this is basically a slow release time. So it's like that kind of thing. That is a result of having a slow release time. If I had a fast release time, it would just be very loud and stupid sounding. But if I had slow release time, it gives you that kind of feel. Like whenever a cymbal hits, we hear like the transient is being squashed a little bit, but then it opens up. But how fast it opens up is determined by your release speed, which is what I mean by that. And it gives us the kind of basically the effect that the bigger transients of the kick and the snare are sidechaining everything else. Is basically what's happening. But I'm doing that without actually sidechaining everything else. So that's pretty cool. In Superior Drummer, the cymbals are handled by two different mics in the way that I have it set up now. I have an overhead and then an ambient. And I pretty much just EQ'd them to taste. Mostly got rid of the lower frequencies. And in the actual mixer EQ, what I've done here is I cut out a hole at 216 hertz, which is where the transient of the synthetic snare lives. Now, this is an AU5 snare. And I got this out of the Break Tweaker set, preset pack. Sample pack, rather. It's not a preset pack. Which is where you'll get these if you want them. And the reason why I have this here is because the realistic sound on drums are not as hard hitting as synthetic sounds on drums, and I kind of wanted the hard hittingness of it. And I could, have spent a lot of time processing the synthetic drums, or the realistic drums rather. But instead, I decided I would just grab some synthetic ones. And like I said, the aspect of it is that they hit a lot harder. And the reason why this particular snare hits a lot harder is because its fundamental tone kind of behaves like a kick drum. It does that pitch slide from high to low, which is what a kick drum sound will do to sound like a kick drum. And so in this particular sense, this snare drum is essentially doing the same thing, just at a much higher frequency. And it gives us the same sort of really thick, hard thud sound. So I mixed that in with the real snare. And this one actually kind of has like, it's called a hybrid because it has that acoustic snare overtone. But the Superior Drummer will actually, if I had it on, will actually cycle. It has round robin. And it plays different samples if you just mess around with it a lot. So that means that kind of resonant-y acoustic overtones are going to interact with the hybrid overtones. So it'll be consistent, but it'll still be different each time a hit happens. So that's cool. fun thing I did about the drum mixing is that in the sidechain channel, where every single thing is going into that's not a drum, I actually have a band stop at 216 hertz. Which means not a single bit of sound is happening in there from the synth that at all in any way. So that means that in terms of the spectrum area, the only thing that fits in there is the transient of the snare, the fundamental tone from the snare. And this helps to keep the clarity of the track present. Although I will note that the guitar channel is going into the sidechain channel and also the master a little bit. Now, what this does is that it kind of like doubles up on the sound. It makes it, you know, because the way that it's being sidechained is that it'll be brought down, but then what'll happen is that this essentially sets the floor, like how low it's going to go. And then, of course, it also adds on top of it and that kind of good stuff. But then you can sort of calibrate how high you want to go in the sidechain and the master to sort of get an even amount. And this will basically ensure that this particular sound that I'm doing it will always be audible, even if the kick and the snare just destroy it. As a result, it's gonna go in there or whatever. But it's actually being high passed higher than the snare anyway, so it's not gonna interfere with what I'm doing here with the band stop business. I turned high Q off here because I actually am also attenuating it slightly. Because I didn't want it to be totally cut off, because if you did that, then it sort of sounds weird and messes with the tones and stuff. But I wanted it to be cut off enough that it was basically a negligible amount of sound coming in when the snare is hitting. So yeah, the Superior Drummer drums are coming into their one bus, and then that one bus is being bussed to another bus, which is also being bussed together with the synthetic drums. So, and then this isn't really, it's not as super compressed as the other one, but what it is doing is it's cutting it off at 0 dB. And then there's also the filter, which is what I'm doing in the beginning to make this happen. That's the fill snare. So yeah, that's pretty much the drums, and it basically plays at the break beat. And here's where we're talking about why I'm at 236 BPM. I felt like working at halftime. Yeah, I mean, this would just be 118 or whatever, but I just really wanted to work at halftime, so I did. That's why I did that. That's really all the whole reason I did that. So let's talk about some synths. I actually did a how to bass about this particular one. This was the one where I used the resonance shaping to be interesting. I also decided that this was going to be the main bass. This is the only synth that's generating bass frequencies. We were talking about the guy at the beginning, but then there's also this dude. Now, you might not know what this is, but what this is event editing. And this is what happens when you engage recording and you move knobs around and you move parameters around. It creates this. This is what that is. If you really wanted to, you could actually convert this to an automation clip, but I didn't care. I didn't actually care. I did not care. So basically what happened was that I made this bass. Not really a bass. It's being high pass, as you see. And then It's just called Cool Art. You might have seen this before. I used it as various praises for things, but then I made a band pass on it. I was basically moving around with the mouse. I thought, okay, well, that modulation sounds cool. And instead of basically trying to recreate what I'm doing with the mouse in automation clips, I decided, well, fuck it, I'll just record it. And I did, and I got this. And then at some points, I actually did automate it. But mostly I kept to just having the event. So now what's cool about this sound, the pad business, is that this is basically just your average, am I automating anything at all? Yep, it's just a straight super saw. It's pretty high frequency. And then I put it in a convolver. I think, yeah, this is just the default convolver completely. And I turned the wet up way high and the dry kind of low. Which, when you do that, sort of makes the sound like it's coming from whatever the convolver is set to. And I covered this a little bit a long time ago in like a how to pad or how to lead or whatever, where I called Accidental Monastery. And this basically, like by itself, you can still kind of say, oh, it sounds like a synth with the reverb. But when you play it against everything else, it actually kind of sounds like a string, like strings in a choir kind of thing. And that's pretty handy and pretty easy. I don't have to break out, east-west to get some strings, because that's pretty much what it would have sounded like, because there's no way I could have made a patch that fit all of this, and you can still kind of hear the really high-quality sample quality of the east-west stuff. It would have sounded like that. So, skip the middleman. Yeah, so overall, there's not really a whole lot to this track. It's just a lot of drum processing is what's the main driving force of this. And it's all just like there's cymbals and crashes and rides and all that and hi-hats, and it's all being high-passed and cut off from the snare with those EQ cuts. Am I sidechaining this? No, it's just limited. I did a little bit of limiting on the I guess that's that's the ambient one. Am I doing it to just the ambient one? And this is basically the same thing I was talking about with the EQ, the low release, the long release time, which causes the sort of auto sidechaining effect. And that I was doing that to basically accentuate that particular channel, and then the overhead, the real overhead, still have the transients kind of in place so that they can interact more heavily with the kick and the snare. Now the Master Maximus. Let's talk about this guy. So this is a bit interesting because this was, again, remember, this is a trailer. This is trailer music. And if you listen to a lot of trailer music that involves electronic elements, you might have noticed a sort of a theme. And the theme is that if there's like dubstep involved, it's not super impressive sounding dubstep. And what do I mean by impressive? I mean, it's not like Kill the Noise, Skrillex style, really nice basses, really awesome, sophisticated, like cool ass sounding basses. It's just regular, acceptable, totally fine basses. That's all there is. The reason for this is obvious, is because you don't want the trailer music to distract too heavily from the trailer. you want it to feel a certain way, but you don't want it to be like, have the viewer be like, I'm more interested in the track than I am when I'm watching. Like that's not a result you want. And so my decisions on the mastering kind of reflected this, because while I did have a pretty solid bass going on, I didn't actually want the bass and the rest of the elements of this track to be as super hard hitting and heavy as like regular EDM stuff. I wanted it to be pretty hard and heavy, but I didn't want it to be like ultra sharp, hard and heavy. I wanted it to be just smoothish kind of thing. So the bass actually wasn't pushed as hard as I wanted it to be. On the low end and everything together. It's just kind of there. You can tell it's there, but it's not insane, right? Mids are regular, the highs are regular, and then I'm not even compressing on the out, and I'm just doing the soft saturation business, which is where we're getting all this distortion from. And like I said before, the reason why this works as well as it does is for two reasons. One, the reasons why it wouldn't work, I actually kind of like. So it's fine because it's just my opinion and that's whatever, I'm going to go do it. And two, because a lot of the things I have, pretty much every melodic and synthetic element in this track has distortion applied to it in some way or another, which means that they're not unduly damaged by the amount of distortion that's on the master. Kind of fun. And yeah, I could have brought it down a little bit. You might have actually noticed that the mix for the trailer is different than the mix for the final track, and that's one of the reasons, is because I gave them a version that had more dynamic range. Because for that reason, that's what you want out of a trailer track. But for the real track, I just crushed it as hard as I wanted to crush it. So that's why I did that. I mean, I couldn't really like do the bass solidness is what I wanted to, even the real track, because certain mixing decisions negated that. Like the way that I pushed a lot of the elements in the rest of the track were somewhat difficult to mitigate. But that's fine though. I still like how it sounds a lot. I like this track a lot. I used to be super duper into this kind of stuff, so the heavy big beat, break beat, kind of like trailerish music. And like I basically ever since I saw The Matrix, like everyone else in the universe. I believe I covered everything of note. If you have any questions about any of this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.